This is Keys to the Shop, episode 374, the fantasy versus reality of opening a coffee shop. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio, and I'm your host for the show. Always happy to have you along, especially hello to all of you who are new to the show. There is a lot of episodes at Keys to the Shop that I think are really going to be helpful for you and your business. And all you need to do to stay updated as these episodes come out is to subscribe to the show wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And also check out the website keystotheshop.com, where you can search all of the past episodes by topic for whatever you happen to need in the moment. And also, if you hear something that's really helpful in these episodes, I would encourage you to share these with your friends, share it on social media, tag Keys to the Shop. And briefly, I want to mention that Keys to the Shop, on top of doing this podcast, also offers consulting and coaching for you and your business. With Keys to the Shop Consulting, you get an approach to coaching and consulting that's all about helping you thrive as a business owner, as a leader, as a manager, and really give you the clarity, perspective, and resources you need to be successful in your career and in your business. I would love to talk with you about what that might look like for you. Let's have a conversation. Reach out to me, Chris at keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS at keystotheshop.com. And let's see how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you. One of the main things that people come to us for is a reliable product. And not only that, because we're specialty coffee, they want a product that is a cut above the rest. So in order to do that, you need knowledge, you need training, but you need amazing equipment. And that's why I'm so excited about the Ground Control Cyclops brewer from Voga Coffee. The SCA award-winning technology in this brewer allows you to extract an incredible range of flavors that previous brewing technology was not able to unlock in your coffee. This means you're able to express the flavor of the coffee to the customer in unique ways, consistently, and the Ground Control is absolutely changing the game for what we can expect from batch brewing. But it not only does batch brewing, it also makes tea, batch iced lattes, batch cold brew, and all of that with a really small footprint. It's easy to train your staff on. So not only do you get the improved quality of your coffee, but you also get other revenue streams. You get more profitability, more efficiency. So that sounds really good, right? So I really would impress upon you that it would be a good idea to check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee. That's their website, where you can find more information about who's using this machine, why it's so amazing. And again, if you're looking to up your quality, diversify your offerings, or just be more efficient and increase your profitability, I really think you need to be looking into getting a Ground Control Cyclops brewer in your store. Check them out again over at groundcontrol.coffee. Now, in my line of work as a barista for many, many years, one of the things that I was always conscious of was the little details of the tools I use and the products I used. I can tell when something is kind of shoehorned in there. Whenever we would run out on the bar of something that was custom made for us, baristas, you would always know. You'd like, well, I guess we're gonna have to use this product now, and that often happened when we're talking about plant-based beverages. Not every plant-based beverage is meant to, showcase and highlight specialty coffee. But when you use something like the Barista series from Pacific, it absolutely is. It was born from a desire to serve specialty coffee and baristas. It's made for baristas and approved by baristas all over the world. So every single plant-based beverage that they produce at Pacific, it produces amazing texture for latte art. It also keeps the balance of the beverage's taste focused on the coffee. And these are the little points that require a lot of research and development to make sure that this is created exactly for this moment, for specialty coffee, to help your coffee shine and help your customers have an amazing coffee experience. So go visit them over at pacificfoodservice.com and check them out and get the product in your store and try it for yourself. I certainly do think you are going to be impressed. If you want the best plant-based beverages possible, then I definitely think you should be using the Barista series from Pacific. Now, everybody, I am really excited to share with you, the Keys to the Shop audience, a collaborative episode that I was invited to be a participant in with the folks over at the Adventures in Coffee podcast. My friend and yours, James Harper of Filter Stories podcast, invited me to collaborate with himself and one of the hosts of the show, Scott Bentley. The other host, Jules Walker, was not in this particular episode, but it was such a great experience to craft this with them around the topic of opening a coffee shop. And of course, you know, Keys to the Shop is all about helping you peel back the layers of what it's like to run a coffee bar, to live that coffee shop lifestyle. And so there's a lot of things that I got to share in this episode and was able to speak to that I think you're all going to really benefit from. There's interviews done with yet-to-be coffee shop owners and experienced coffee shop owners, some of which are no longer coffee shop owners. And so you get perspectives coming from different directions. And all of us have a great time digging into the details and helping present you with the idea of what is it like to really run a coffee shop. And if you're considering this, what are the things that you need to consider? And so I am airing this episode on my show, this collaboration with Adventures in Coffee. Certainly you should be subscribed to their podcast over there at Adventures in Coffee. And after playing this episode here, I'm going to come back and give additional commentary to what I shared in the episode. So with all that said, I hope you really enjoy it. And here is the episode.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome to Adventures in Coffee, the podcast which filters out the humdrum and percolates fascinating stories into your day.
Oh, dude, I'm cringing.
Well, get used to it.
Dear listener, we bring you surprising coffee stories to open your taste buds and your mind and try to inspire you to have adventures in your own kitchen.
I'm James Harper, professional storyteller and the creator of the Filter Stories Coffee podcast.
My name is Scott Bentley. I'm the founder of Caffeine Magazine. I'm also a brand consultant. So yeah, I wear many hats. What can I say? I keep a local milliner in work.
So Scott, have you ever been tempted to open your own coffee shop?
Hell no. And I'll tell you why. So a number of years ago, somebody said to me, have you ever worked in a coffee shop? And I thought to myself, that would make a great feature. And so I spoke to the lovely people at Notes here in London, and they have a coffee cart based in Borough Market. And they said, why don't you come and work with us and see how it is? So for around 3 or 4 days in the middle of winter, I got up at like 6 a.m. every morning, made my way into London and worked on a coffee cart. And while it was wonderful to meet the customers and see the people, it's just not me. It's just not what I want to do.
So Scott, let me be clear. What was it about standing outside, serving 100 lattes an hour? What about that experience wasn't appealing to you?
I don't like to get dirty. I don't like to get dirt under my nails. I like to sit in a lovely and clean environment, air conditioned. That's me.
I'm with you. Listen, I'm absolutely with you. And you know, I cannot tell you the number of times someone has asked me, hey, James, you like coffee? Why don't you open a coffee shop? And I think for a lot of people, and even a lot of my friends, you know, they dream about opening coffee shops themselves. And even some of our listeners, like Liam from Scotland.
There's an image in my head that it was actually a TV show. They're all hanging out at the coffee shop, and it was that kind of just relaxed atmosphere. And that was, I thought, that'd be such a cool place to spend your time in.
Was Liam talking about Friends?
Basically. It's basically the Friends vision of the cafe. But Scott, I also have a whole bunch of friends who have actually done the whole opening a coffee shop thing. And you know, the way they talk about it, this is not some kind of fun, easygoing sitcom.
I think for the first couple of months, I often slept in the place on the couch, and I worked very late until the evening, and I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
So with all these friends and all these stories flying around, I wanted to understand, what is it actually like to open a coffee shop? To get beyond that simple idealistic dream that we all have of it. And so this is what this episode is going to be about. We're going to be hearing 3 different stories from people at different stages in the coffee shop journey. One person who hasn't even began yet, one person who's in the middle of it, and one person who tried it and said, that ain't for me.
So what you're saying is this is like a Christmas Carol. Those are sort of like past, present, and future.
Absolutely. But as we were developing this episode, Scott, we came across the problem that, there are millions of coffee shop stories. So, every story you hear, how reflective is it of like the general experience? And so that's why we actually decided to bring on an expert co-host, a person who has heard more cafe stories than anyone I know. His name is Chris DeFerio, and he's the host of another coffee podcast called Keys to the Shop. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be on the show.
I've been trying to get rid of James for a while. So, hey, look, if all goes well today, you could have a job, mate.
Chris, tell our dear listener a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, James. I am a 2-decade-long coffee professional, all in retail coffee, barista work, management work. Of course, I do the Keys to the Shop podcast and consulting now, where it is all focused on giving value and insights to people running coffee shops and people who are about to open coffee shops, equipping people for success and working through the inevitable challenges that are either expected or a lot of times unexpected.
That word unexpected, that's a bit ominous. What's the craziest realization someone's had when opening a coffee shop?
The biggest one is the people and the amount of management of people. And I've told a lot of people that it's similar to just being a full-time camp counselor in a lot of ways if you've never done it before.
Oh my goodness. I want to say that, when we were brainstorming this episode, we thought a lot about what are the different aspects of running a coffee shop that just aren't that well understood or well appreciated for people who actually haven't done it yet. So for our dear listener, could you tell them what were the big 3 things that we settled on that we wanted to explore in this episode?
Yeah, first there's the money, and oftentimes there's just a cursory glance at money that doesn't really go into depth that you need to run a business. Then there's the scene, and what I mean by the scene is what you actually see in the industry, the culture of it. For a lot of people, they want to see themselves in it, and they want to see themselves making change in the industry of putting their mark in the business. And finally, there's the dream. There's an idealism that is surrounding that phrase that oftentimes doesn't line up with what they thought the dream would look like.
So let's explore the first of these 3 aspects, the money. Chris, from your experience, how many people have you come across who have dived into creating a coffee shop but never really thought through the financial aspects properly?
I think there's plenty of people, because by and large, people who start coffee shops generally are not people who've worked in coffee before. And there's a reason why you don't see that many former baristas opening coffee bars compared to people who have no coffee experience. Is because they know what it's like.
Maybe they realize early on that there's not a lot of money to make.
What might be good to start us off is a story that I came across while interviewing someone named Michael Idov, who opened a coffee shop in New York way back in 2004 with his partner Lily. And Michael subsequently wrote a very, very popular article for Slate about the experience. And the title of that, maybe aptly titled, is My Coffee House Nightmare.
Suddenly, that article that I wrote about owning the cafe and about failing at it has become one of the most popular articles Slate had ever run.
Oh man, yeah. I remember reading that article when it came out, maybe even 10 years ago. And, with a title like that, My Coffee Shop Nightmare, we're starting our Christmas Carol maybe in the worst possible way with someone who has failed.
It might be true here for Michael as well. Further in the conversation, we got the lowdown on kind of the money side of things, the financial side. And it was pretty clear to me that it was linked to what we heard from Liam earlier, in that belief that a coffee shop would be a cool place to spend his time.
A lot of cafe owners and prospective cafe owners, I think, are romantics at heart. They want kind of a projection of an idealized living room where they themselves can spend the day and feel fulfilled. Which is, of course, anyone who's interested in actually making money has to turn off that side of themselves.
This is really interesting, isn't it, guys? Because there does seem to be this whole idea of having a cafe, which is an extension of your own living room.
But I mean, Chris, how pervasive is this cozy cafe fantasy?
Well, of course, this is extremely common for most people that experience coffee from the other side of the counter, but we don't really take into consideration all of the work that created that very convenient and very warm, fuzzy feeling that we get as consumers. That's very much on purpose. The problem, of course, is that if we set out to do similar things, we're blindsided by the financial realities of what it actually takes to run something like that so that customers can have that experience. And in my conversation with Michael, he spoke directly to this.
Your desire for this place to be kind of a social hub is directly at odds with your desire for it to be profitable, because social hubs don't make money. People who come in to, read newspapers and chill are going to take up a table for 2-3 hours, running up a tab of maybe $15 if you're lucky.
Yeah, and that whole idea of reading a newspaper in a coffee shop was like the 2004 equivalent of sitting down on your laptop and like working on your screenplay for hours while ordering like a single espresso.
So let me just claw it back to money for a second. Chris, tell me, what does it actually cost to set up a cafe in the first place?
Great question. Generally, if you want a brick and mortar coffee shop, you're talking about anywhere from $175,000 to $250,000 all told. And there's a lot of people today doing smaller, very micro operations and pop-ups that you could comfortably get into it for $75K. But the financial aspect of running a cafe up front, if you look at that number, it seems shocking that it would cost that much, because after all, isn't this just a place for the community to hang out? And at the same time, you have to consider the building and all the costs associated with that, build out, fixed costs of rent and utilities. You have people and their wages, including yourself and the fact that you still have to live.
So out of curiosity, did Michael spend that much money?
Well, not quite. But in Michael's case, he wanted to create a Viennese aesthetic, and that meant a lot of renovations to the existing space.
We wanted to spend no more than $40,000 opening it. So that put certain limitations on the decor, the renovations to the space, etc.
40,000? I mean, I know that must sound a lot to some people, but to fit out a coffee shop and do everything and make it look seriously high end, the Viennese coffee houses, that aesthetic, that's not reclaimed timber and a few old chairs you found in a skip. To do that on 40K, that guy's got some balls if he thinks he's pulling that off.
I think even in his voice, we can tell that he might have known that it wasn't enough. And in today's economy, the expense of just buying your equipment today for a coffee shop the size of what he had back then would send you up closer to 60K.
Just for the equipment? The espresso machine and the grinders.
Espresso machine, grinders, hot water tower, brewers, from large to small pieces of equipment. You put it on a spreadsheet, and I'm doing this for a client right now, it adds up.
Whew, man. And Chris, when I was chatting with Liam, one thing he asked, which of course I was very interested to know, is how much do you actually earn being the owner of a coffee shop?
Of course, James, you want to know about the money because, Scrooge is your hero after all.
I think every coffee shop owner in the world should be Scrooge, because I guarantee they'll still be in business in a year.
Whether his baristas are there in a year or not is debatable. But that's a good question, James, about what you can expect to make from a coffee shop. And for most cafes, we're talking about 3 to 5% profit margin. So in a lot of cases, you'd have to be making millions in revenue per year in order to pay yourself a, quote unquote, professional salary on a regular basis. But most owners are actually paying themselves and can only afford to pay themselves less than what their baristas are making.
Wow. And I mean, when Michael was running his Viennese style cafe in New York, how much was he paying himself?
I don't think at this point it's going to be any surprise that it wasn't much, but let's hear it from Michael.
The numbers would basically work if Lily and I both worked full-time for free.
Oh my goodness me.
But James, wait, Michael has more to add.
You have to run two sets of numbers, one with you there and one without you there. And if it doesn't make sense without you there, then you have basically forced yourself to work for any of it to make sense. So if you want an unscheduled vacation or there's some emergency even, if any situation like this immediately ruins your entire business plan, then it's not a sound business plan.
This is the truth, isn't it? Working for free is not only undervaluing yourself, it's just irresponsible, and it can bring the whole business down.
So Chris, it sounds like in Michael's case, money was a big problem. Is that what ultimately led them to close the cafe? Lack of money?
In some sense, I think you're right. It's not just that, though, because everything that we do is interconnected, and it impacts us in a lot of different ways, and in not the least of which is personal. So this actually turns out to be a story that comes to an end because of the personal.
Lily and I have always been very close, and we collaborated on a lot of projects. But when you spend all your time at home and then you spend all of your time together in a business that's not particularly thriving, where all you do is troubleshoot, we realized that it's actually like really, really ruining our relationship.
I mean, I hope it wasn't too bad for them. I mean, what kind of damage were we talking about in the end?
We ended up losing, I believe, about 90,000 on this.
I mean, we're talking about money here, guys, aren't we? And I think this is a cautionary tale. It doesn't inspire confidence to our dear listener wanting to open that coffee shop with this idea that they're going to be losing the best part of 100K.
We have totally opened on such a downer. My goodness. But Chris, I mean, if you do open a coffee shop and you're thinking about the money, is there a lesson here? Like, is the lesson to like learn to live on less and find fulfillment in things that are not to do with money? I mean, what's the lesson?
I am a fan of the quote that people will give up for money the things that they think money will give them. Ooh. And I think you need to count the cost, let's say, and really figure out what's important to you. Is it only money, or is it the things that maybe you can get without it?
I mean, yeah, holidaying, camping by a lake is a very cheap way to have a great time with the family, for example.
Have you spoken to my wife recently?
I can't imagine you camping.
No, nor can I. Nor can she.
So folks, it is with a heavy heart that we move away from the money side. We're drawing a line under the accounts. And now let's look at the second of those three understood aspects about running a coffee shop, the scene. Chris, can you unpack this a bit more for our dear listener?
You know, one of the reasons why somebody would want to open a coffee shop is perhaps to offer something different to what they see as a plateau in the industry. They want to take things to the next level. They want to explore. They want to solve what they perceive to be a problem. And they feel that coffee is a vehicle to be able to do that.
This sounds like a gentleman that I met recently at a trade show here in the UK called Cafe Culture.
My name's Ben Eames, and I run a brand called Bubbly Batch Coffee.
Ben is still a couple of years away from starting his business.
I think we're at a point now where everyone is serving similar or the same coffee, roasted by very talented roasters. Essentially, like the whole idea behind my brand is being accessible and poking fun at people that take it a bit too seriously. That comes down to atmosphere, aesthetic, the correct location, but also the coffee you're using has to be exceptional, and the people that you're employing have to either be working to a high level or really committed to advancing to that level.
Chris, from your experience, what happens when people do open a cafe with these sorts of very high expectations of the brand and of themselves?
You know, I think the goal is very laudable to have high expectations right from the front. I feel like you need to practice delayed gratification in the idea that the pure vision of what you want first might look different than what you imagined. And so take time to consider that first you need to learn, and then you can create something different.
And from my chat with Ben, he seems to have taken that to heart.
I think it's important to go into other places, other countries, other shops, and learning what works and what doesn't, and how you can make it better.
If you are getting into the business of a coffee shop because you want to be a part of the scene, make some waves, how important is research?
It's really important. And it's not just research, it's soul searching. And so as you learn and grow as a person, and I think you start to accept that there are common things that are okay to put in your business model. And then there are other things that are going to differentiate you that will satisfy that urge that might get you into the scene to make waves and put your spin on it. But it's not about wholesale leaving what's working. It's just offering something that's iterative. I would say that most people would do well if they are looking to do something similar to Ben, to take some time to reflect on their concept and do what Ben has done and learn from the industry, learn about yourself, and realize that there is a lot on the line here.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I love what you said there, Chris. If you want to get into the coffee shop game to shake things up, there's a lot on the line financially. So do a lot of research so you know what actually works, and don't discard things from your business model that other cafes are doing, because that might be the thing that keeps your business alive.
Absolutely.
Scott, you told me at the beginning of the show that you didn't want to open a coffee shop, but we've heard some stories since then. Have you changed your mind?
Well, I've got to say, actually, they've been quite compelling. But on reflection, still don't want to open a coffee shop.
Well, okay. Listen, we have one final aspect that we need to explore, and that is the dream itself.
And to be honest with you, James, when I spoke to some other cafe owners at Cafe Culture, this was the one most people latched onto.
It's always been kind of a dream for me to have my own coffee shop in some form.
The dream is to bring a bit of style, a bit of difference up north.
We decided to open up a place. It's a dream that we wanted to happen, and we're slowly getting there.
The dream is to create a space where my love for coffee meets our passion for art.
A lot of dreams there, a lot of dreams. And actually, as it turns out, I have a friend in London who actually followed through on her dream.
My name is Hiam, and I have a cafe. I opened it 1 month before the first big lockdown for the pandemic, and I'm still here. So I guess that's a thing to celebrate.
And we had a wonderful conversation where I really got a kind of an inside track as to how it went with her dream. I'll quickly tell you her story. Her dream was to mix different parts of her heritage and upbringing.
I'm Palestinian, Jordanian, but I grew up in Sweden. The gap for me was to have somewhere that's inviting, that's welcoming, that's a really nice environment for people where they can come in and enjoy Middle Eastern food.
This was where her daydreams were taking her while she was in the London corporate grind.
I had my spend, my targets, my team, my marketing initiatives.
But after a bunch of years,
my brain just started racing. And I was like, wait, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore.
Is this the part of the movie where she storms into her boss's office, throws her laptop down and tells him where to stick it before she kind of marches out?
Is this how you quit every job, Scott?
No, most of the time I get sacked.
True story, that. No. While she was doing the day job, she was actually looking up the wholesale cost of beans and figuring out business rates. She was planning her business. Now, she wasn't naive about the effort she was going to have to put in, but she also didn't realize just how hard it would be to open a cafe.
Obviously, having a cafe is a very romantic dream for a lot of people. For me, yes, I was excited by it. I thought it'd be cool to have your friends come over and to hang out, but I knew that it would be incredibly, incredibly hard work. And I was willing to put that in.
And despite all her many years of planning, here's the reality.
I often refer to the shop as the madhouse. Every time I felt that, okay, we've dealt with a challenge, now let's move on, then another bigger challenge comes. Even now, when it comes to the outlook regarding the pandemic, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it's behind us, now we have a war to deal with, which has an impact on costs. So it is mad, it's constant.
So Chris, to what extent is this dream of creating a neighborhood space in North London, and the reality is she's feeling like she's rushed off her feet at every moment. How common is this experience?
It really does sound like she's having adventures in coffee, if you ask me.
Nice. I like what you did there, Chris.
Yes, and it's true, though. I think there's a sense this is part of the game, and it's a discovery process.
Look, I really sympathize with, what she's going through here, but a lot of these issues, things like COVID, they affected a lot of different businesses. So what particular fires was she putting out day to day?
Well, she told me actually one of the biggest fires she had was in her kitchen.
We have to hope that was not a real fire.
No, it wasn't. It was actually with her chef.
They were sort of messing us about. This is probably what created a lot of the anxiety for me now, is that every couple of days they would pull a sickie. So we would have to close the kitchen. We wouldn't have a kitchen running. Every day I'd wake up and think, oh my goodness, is it going to be one of those days? And also they refused to teach my partner, who's a chef, show them, the menu and go through things with them. So they wanted to have this power.
And there came a day where it all blew up?
They were a very unstable character, and it was their final day, and they decided to leave mid-service, and it got quite aggressive. Thankfully, my partner was there to help manage the situation, and that's when we just closed the kitchen as soon as they left and decided to learn the whole menu. You're so scared of, will we be able to do it? When are we going to be able to open next? How are we going to run this on our own?
You know, it does sound like an incredibly stressful situation. And I think what's interesting about this situation is that managing any business with people in it is also managing those people and their lives. And I think what's also interesting here, for many people that have spent maybe a lot of their lives in either the corporate world or being employed, there's a degree of stress there. But when you become self-employed or when you start your own business, it's not like there's less stress because you don't have a boss anymore. It's just a different stress.
I love how you put it, Scott. It's different stresses, and there's nothing that helps you cope like knowing that you are actively taking the opportunity that problems bring you to solve those problems little by little over time. If, however, you don't do that, then they will remain as they were always, and eventually will get the better of you. But I've seen many people chip away at exploring these problems and saying, well, how can we build a system that helps us handle this better? So it's not all on me to wing it. It is built into my business, and we are better for it, and we can handle twice as much stress and be twice as happy as a result.
And Chris, that sounds like really great advice. But James, can we circle back? Because you left us on a bit of a cliffhanger there. How did it all end with Hayam, the chef, and the kitchen?
Well, when we last heard from Hayam, she was scrambling with her partner to learn an entire menu overnight. And then the sun rises the next day.
And then suddenly we're open and we're making the most amazing food and we're getting the most amazing feedback. And suddenly you feel that you're in such a position of power because you're like, it doesn't matter. If someone leaves, if they don't want to come in, that's absolutely fine because we could just run it ourselves.
Sounds like she handled it wonderfully and rose to the occasion. And without much time to respond, you have to rely on the wisdom that you've developed over the course of running your business to get you through. And so the confidence that she felt at the end of this process is because she realized that that's in her. Hopefully, if something like that happens again, she's developed more systems and things that will help her go through these with less stress and more confidence. That's the goal of running a business, is you get more streamlined, and stress is turned to systems, and it turns to more freedom to serve and to thrive as an owner in a business.
I love that. Stress turns to systems, turns to freedom.
Did she feel that all this stress was worthwhile in the end? Was that sacrifice worthwhile to her?
Yeah, so when I interviewed Hayam, she had just been on vacation for a week, the first in heaven knows how long, maybe I think ever, since opening the cafe. And she gets back and it is just the madhouse again, as she describes it, right? It starts out quite stressful, staff are sick, she's running around, it's getting busier and busier. But amidst all of that, she got these really nice moments with her regulars.
We had so many lovely comments about the food and about missing us when we were closed for a week. And when you're exhausted and emotionally just out of it, this is what really just keeps you going. When you get some really nice interactions with customers and it just sort of reaffirms why you're there. If you want to do it, just go for it. It'll be stressful at times. Try to just look at the bigger picture of how exciting and amazing it is that you've built something out of nothing.
I mean, this really does sound much more like a happy ending, or at least a more hopeful ending.
And Chris, kind of curious, this is Hayam's story. To what extent is she reflective of most coffee shop owners who had that kind of community dream to begin with?
I think it's very reflective of most people that I've talked to. And for a lot of them, it is worth it. Not to sound too pithy, but opening a coffee shop will challenge you. It'll challenge your concept and your perspective of who you are and what your community needs. But if you're open to that change and you want to take that adventure on, then I'd say you should go for it.
So Scott, curious to know, you've now been taken deep into a number of different experiences. When are you going to be opening yours?
Never! Still have no desire to open a coffee shop, but I absolutely praise those people who do decide to take it on. It is their dream. It's just not my dream.
And Chris, thank you very much for coming on the show and bringing your perspective.
And if anyone wants to find out a little bit more about your podcast, could you give us where we can find that?
Sure. You can subscribe to Keys to the Shop podcast on any podcast platform out there. And you can also go to the website keystotheshop.com to learn about the company and the consulting that I offer, as well as following Keys to the Shop on Instagram. Very simple, at Keys to the Shop.
We'll put links in the show notes to all of these.
All right, everybody. Well, like I said, you get perspective when you listen to this episode from different angles. People have real world experiences, of course, operating coffee bars, and sharing them with you, I think, is so valuable. And just being honest about what it takes to open a cafe and some of the hardships that some of the guests on this episode incurred are sobering. And that is not to be a downer or a bummer. It is to give a sense of grounding and to allow you, if you are opening a coffee shop for the first time, even if you already own a coffee shop and you're wanting to expand into a second, third, or fourth store, there's a lot of things to consider. All the things that we talked about here, the money, the scene, and the dream, and there's other things as well, are points that I think you need to spend a lot of time thinking about, meditating on, studying, and forecasting. What I notice a lot of times when it comes to opening coffee shops is we tend to gravitate towards audacious goals. What is that? BHAG, Big Hairy Audacious Goal, that acronym kind of flies around on the internet business world. And we use kind of this very quick timeline of getting a shop open really quick, or maybe we subconsciously are not, we're avoiding thinking about the not fun parts of the business because we want to stay motivated. We want to stay passionate about what we're doing. And in the process of doing that, what we're actually doing is shooting ourselves in the foot, because we do need to confront these things head on, or else they will confront us later in the process of opening, as you heard from these testimonies of the guests on the show today. There is no escaping the realities, and that's why the episode was titled the way it was. And fantasy sounds a little flippant. It is not to say that somebody is wrong for dreaming of opening a coffee shop, but the dream, in order to come true, will need to meet reality. And in that meeting, there's going to be aspects of the dream that, just like a regular dream, need to submit to the physics of the real world. In some of my dreams I can fly, but I'm going to have to compromise exactly how that happens. I'm going to maybe need some additional equipment to make that happen. But if we're talking about a coffee shop, there's going to have to be a reckoning. And as much as you can do that in the process of opening your coffee shop, or even in the process of running and growing your business that already exists now, the better off you're going to be, because at least you are entering in fully aware. There's the people, the product, the finances, the business, all of it needs to be considered. And I hope that this episode was something that motivated you to that end. And just like every episode of the show, I want to make sure that you know in the show notes, there's a list of recommended episodes from Keys to the Shop that you can listen to that are supplemental to this one. So they're on the same theme of this topic of fantasy versus reality and opening a coffee shop. So after this, I would encourage you, go to the show notes and listen to those episodes, because I think, if you're interested in getting a pretty well-rounded perspective on how you should approach these things, whether it's new business or growth of an existing business, I think that's going to really be helpful for you. So I want to say a big thank you to the folks over at Adventures in Coffee for having me on the show and allowing me to be a part of this collaborative episode. You can visit them over at caffeinepodcast.co.uk. And also you need to subscribe to the podcast as well, Adventures in Coffee. You can find that on any podcast player. And now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback from me about this episode or anything else on Keys to the Shop, you can always reach me at chris@keystotheshop.com. That's my email. That's also where you can reach out to inquire about Keys to the Shop consulting, where I get to work one-on-one with you to help you make your coffee dream a reality. I definitely would love to have a conversation with you. Just email chris@keystotheshop.com to set up a free discovery call. Again, for Keys to the Shop consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. And so, of course, I want to mention to you, one of the great places you can go to get resourced and energized and equipped for success in making your dream of coffee shop a reality is Coffee Fest trade shows. You can check them out over at coffeefest.com because it's more than just a trade show. The free or accessibly priced workshops, lectures, trainings, panel discussions offer incredible insights that are life-changing, that will help you avoid needless mistakes and establish a great foundation. There's events like cold brew competition, the latte art competition, and also, like I said, it's a trade show, so there's tons of vendors there that are offering you the best stuff to stock your coffee shop with. You get to interact with them one-on-one, ask them all your questions, get some samples. Everyone loves samples. So I definitely love Coffee Fest. I've been doing this since 2004, so that's quite a few times I've been out there, and I've gotten to see firsthand how valuable this event can be. So check them out at coffeefest.com. 2023 shows are coming up. New York City to start with, and then Louisville, Kentucky. Make sure you plan on going to one of these events. There's 2 more happening the rest of the year that are going to be announced very soon. I'm going to be at all these shows, so I hope to see you there, and do say hello. I'd love that. So anyway, check them out again over at coffeefest.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today. Everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this collaborative episode with Adventures in Coffee. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you got a lot from this. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.